I am personally very happy, but also in a nostalgic feeling of it's coming to an end, right? The session 10, we're covering the last three chapters. Not tonight. We're going to cover, we still have one more chapter that we will cover towards the end of the year. But tonight we will cover two more chapters of this amazing book, Taught in Life. And as Kirsten was saying, please don't take this as a way for you to understand or to study this book. Purchase your copy, have your copy. If you want, if you can read Portuguese, it's in PDF online as well. You can always find it. But also what I have been learning, I'm pretty sure many of you who has been sharing this moment with me and everybody else, we see that there's much more that we learn from the other books, things that we have to go and rescue, that Emmanuel brings and say, well, wait a minute, where's this, right? And then we go back to the pillars of Spiritism and we learn even more. And we dive even more into the teachings of this book and what Spiritism brings to us, of what this mirror of life is, right? Our mind, how we project ourselves, how onto other people, into the environment, how we manipulate the universal cosmic fluid, and how we receive the vibrations of the manipulations of the universal cosmic fluid caused by other people. It seems just like trivial things, very simple things, but it's not. If we were to really take this in consideration every day of our lives, we would live better. And it has been a journey for me, and I'm quite sure that I have talked to other individuals who have studied this book profoundly, even more than I have, and it's a life-changing event for sure. So tonight, as we dive into these two topics, illness and death, please, 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 please do not feel that we're going to talk about something dramatic or dark. It is serious, but it comes as more as a reminder. It comes as a friendly reminder from Emmanuel for us to look at these two aspects of life that we go through. Everybody go through the moments of illness, whether physically, whether mentally, or even the difficulties that we have in life. And we all have to leave the physical body. We left the physical body and we came back. And we want to bring that back to our minds and to our hearts, because sometimes we forget that, right? Before we were into this body right here, before we came back to this body, or not back to this body, before we received this physical body, we were into another body. We had many reincarnations. And therefore, we are this beautiful being that we have, that we are today. That we connect with one another, right? That we exchange information, that we analyze things this way, not Chris's way, not Alba's way, right? We're different, and that is very important for us. Our individuality is an amazing thing that sometimes we take for granted, and we don't value much, and we don't ask the reasons why we are this way and not that way. We perceive things in this way and not in a more subtle way. Or sometimes we're too abrupt. Or sometimes we need to have that energy to be energetic against or towards certain things, and we're not. So I want just to cover a couple of things as we go along into this topic, but we're going to talk to them about them interchangeably, meaning we may jump from the idea of death into illness, the reasons why, so on and so forth. Emmanuel starts this way, talking about illness. One cannot say with finality that all physical diseases are a result of the mind, but we can all agree that mental processes have a certain effect upon disease. Of course, sickness is present mainly to purify the spirit, beginning in the cradle and following the person through their life. In the same category of tests are the congenital constraints, the unexpected mutilations, and the diseases of difficult treatment and cure. They come as a necessary therapy, most certainly planned in advance as a means to help the patient. However, in the great majority of cases, diseases are the result of harmful mental reflexes affecting the body, which cause malfunctions of the elements that compose it. In other words, we don't have the final word to say the cold that I had a couple months ago was caused by a mental reflex that we talk here about so much, right? We don't have the final word on that because it could be something from the environment, or in fact, it could be something that I wasn't watchful. And that cold, because of my mental process, the way I process things, the way I've been thinking, living my life, my immune system is so low that I came in contact with the virus, and guess what? I got sick. Whereas my partner, someone who works with me and deal with the same environment, nothing happened. There's no final word, but we know that it affects how we're, if we're down, then guess what? Yeah, you're more prone to get this disease or get that disease, go through this, go through that, right? But the thing is, when we look at Emmanuel saying that these sickness, these difficulties that we go through in the physical body, comes to help us, sometimes it's kind of hard to understand. Sometimes it's kind of hard to digest certain things that perhaps a child who is born with a deficiency or of some sort, that child is coming with that issue or reborn with that issue to learn something. It's still pretty hard, even for us Spiritists, knowing that there is a before and the during and the after, that is still pretty difficult to understand this. But as we will see, there are two causes for our pain, right? Current one, as Emmanuel is saying right here, a lot of the things that is happening to us, guess what? Is caused by our mental reflexes. What we are thinking right now, what we're expecting from others, and what we're receiving from others as well. And we can't stop that. We can't stop. We're constantly changing, exchanging information. As recently we were discussing at home, I started talking about something, whatever comment I was making about a subject, and then my mind started going off in a tangent where I was like, okay, a couple minutes later I was like, why am I thinking about this? And then I just went back, kind of as if it was kind of rolling the tape back, and I said, okay, I was thinking about this, so this led me to think about this, and this, so on and so forth. And we were constantly thinking. And sometimes we don't even catch ourselves, to the point that we're thinking negative things, dramatic things, right? We're connecting with what we see on TV, and then it's like we're sick. We're so down that it's like, where's my energy, right? So before we dive into this idea of the before, the during, the after, or what we're thinking, I wanted to go ahead and reflect again on this passage, blessed are the afflicted. It's on chapter 5, item 1, 2, and 3 of the Gospel according to Spiritism, that this is a teaching. The reason we bring it is because this is the teachings that we received from the Master. And as we read right now with John of the Angelus, she's always trying to make this connection. So I think it's important, as Emmanuel does the same way. The passage, this is actually the second verse of the Beatitudes. Blessed are they who weep, for they shall be comforted. Blessed are they who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they shall be filled. Blessed are they who suffer persecution because of righteousness, for the kingdom of heaven is theirs. When we read this passage, there are two things that we need to take in consideration. Jesus is talking about that we will inherit something. It's not that moment, that these individuals who are suffering, they will inherit something in the future. It's not there. It's not right at that moment, right? So we have to acknowledge that there is a presence, or there is an acknowledgement of the future in itself, right? So if we are suffering because of something, do we agree that God imposed that suffering on me? Because he's talking about for those who weep. Why am I weeping? Was that imposed by someone? Well, if it was imposed by someone, there is a reason, right? If it is imposed for someone, but we don't find the reason of the imposition of that suffering right now, that the root of or the cause of that suffering is where? In the past. So we have to acknowledge the future because Jesus is promising something to us, a better life in the future. But we also have to acknowledge the presence of a wrongdoing in the past that is now causing me to weep. And here we are. We know the past. We know that there is a future, but here we are in the present. And this is what we need to really focus right now, because what has happened, we are seeing the results right now. But it's what we're going to do now that's going to liberate us in the future and find this peace that he's mentioning here. And Kardec brings the vicissitudes of life are of two types, or if one prefers, they have two very different sources that are important to differentiate. Some have their cause in the present life, others outside of it. So a lot of the illness, the reason we bring this here, a lot of the illnesses that we have, a lot of the difficulties that we have two roots, we can go back and rescue the causes of these issues, perhaps in the now, our imprudence, our ambition, lack of discipline, lack of perseverance, wrong conduct, not limiting our desires, self-interest, vanity, and intemperance. A lot of the things that we're suffering right now, let us not be or fall into the temptations to say that we are victims of the past. It's because we are not taking care of ourselves. It's because we're not taking care of our environment, and it's because we're not really paying attention to our mental reflexes. What we generate towards others and what we're receiving from others as well. If we were to take at least two of these things, it doesn't have to be the most difficult areas that we have to work on, but two of these things. Wrong conduct, for example, or lack of discipline. I have to get up in the morning to go to the gym. I have to get up early in the morning that I get to work on time. Simple things. Every time just a parenthesis here, every time we come in contact with the good deeds, right, or the good things of life, we think that is something up here that is not attainable. But just small things, if we were to change small things in our lives, we would feel much lighter. Much, much lighter, and we would have a much better life. On the other hand, if we cannot find the causes of our afflictions in the current life, we have to go and rescue these afflictions in past lives. Because it would not be just for a child to be born with a deficiency or whatever the problem may be, or someone who is working their lives and doing the right things, and then suddenly they suffer an accident that is unstoppable. Where is the cause of it? If we are acknowledging a God that is just and love, there's got to be a cause, right? So losses of loved ones, as we just mentioned, someone who is doing extremely well in life, or somebody who is trying their best and something happens, accidents that could not be prevented, natural disasters, for example, right? Where are the cause of it? And sometimes we have to acknowledge as well, and we can find more information about it on the book Action and Reaction, that we're going to talk about a little bit more, the ideas or the explanations of these natural disasters, on how it happened. In a book by Joana de Angelis as well, not Joana de Angelis, by Divaldo Franco, Evolution to Worlds. Where's the book? I don't think we have it here. Also explain a whole lot. Congenital infirmities and so on and so forth. Huh? No, and it's not After the Storm. It's another book. I forget the name now. It will come to mind, and I'll remind everyone. But thank you. So we need to look at these aspects, and we need to acknowledge, first of all, where we are. It's important that we take responsibility for where we are in our lives, right? responsibility for what we're thinking, for what we're feeling as well. As well as we take a look at the past and say, yes, we all know. We all know that we were not perfect then. So much so that we're still reincarnated here on planet Earth, right? Going through all the tribulations that we're going through in our lives. So we're not perfect. We know that. Now, what we personally and collectively can do is what will dictate where we will be in the future. So that in the future, we're not going to be in meetings like this thinking of what we have done. Hopefully, we'll be meeting to say, oh, you know what? How we're going to rescue this group of people, this other group of people who hasn't done so well yet. Much given, much will be asked, right? So perhaps we'll be in better meetings to help one another. And who are we? I know it's something that we have seen it. I know it's something that we talk about over and over and over. It's not just the physical body that our friend Julie was showing to us last week, right? Because before we reincarnate, as Emmanuel kind of mentioned over here, there was a preparation. So we are spirits, right? We're spirits at a human level. We're not just this physical body. We have the physical body, but in order for our spirits to connect with the physical body, we have to have what? Our spiritual body, or perispirit. Why is this important in this study? Because we're not the illness. We're not the illness. And I'll repeat again, we're not the illness. Whatever we may go through, we're not it. And not only for ourselves, this serves for other people as well. When we go and say something about an individual who is sick, right, or judge, that person, that individual is not the illness. He's a spirit, or she's a spirit, just like we are, in a process of evolution. Now, what he has done in the past is not for us to judge either. And what he and she is doing with their lives right now, it's not for us to judge. If we want something to change, we got to go and help, right? Sometimes we have to be a little bit more energetic with one another. Sometimes we have to give it time, because time will change, right? But it's important for us to see this again and differentiate ourselves or separate ourselves from the illness that we're going through right now. What is affecting our bodies right now? Because as Emmanuel says, that illness is just a moment to wash all the stuff out, all the bad stuff out. And how does it come out? Because the negative thoughts is being generated in the spirit, through the spirit, right? It's passing through, if we can say this way, just in lame terms, passing through the perispirit and dumped, thank you, that's a good word, into the physical body. Into the physical body. So we need to change right here. If we want to see a change in this right here, in our environment, the change has to start right over here. Because the influences that we receive, especially in the environment that we live, is pretty detrimental to come from the outside to the inside. It has to be a collective thing. It has to be a collective thing. The choices that we make towards our bodies, towards one another, as well as by these choices being generated, these positive choices, will change ourselves as well. What are we going to talk about more? Human beings, incarnated beings. We are spirit, we have our perispirit, obviously, and we have our physical body. What is the difference from us to a discarnate one? A spirit and the perispirit. Does the spirit stop sending vibrations just because they don't have the physical body? No. Do they stop receiving vibrations just because they don't have the physical body? No. We're still connected. We're connected incarnate with incarnate, obviously. We can see one another, right? But we're also connected with this realm, our true nature. And we will continue to be connected when we get to death a little bit more in depth. We'll see how we're still connected with our own thoughts, with the same very things that we have created, sometimes potentiated to a point that bring us madness. So we need to change. We need to change right now. Emmanuel then continues and say, every strong emotion that reaches the body is like a hammer blow on a sensitive machine, and all afflictions that are nurtured and maintained are like a malfunctioning in a machine. Malfunctioning machine. So it's everything that we think, everything that we perhaps we're promoting for, at least we think that is promoting to another person. Guess what? We're doing to ourselves first. We're doing to ourselves. It's imprinting in ourselves, in our perispirit, and it's imprinting on our physical body as well. There are many amazing studies nowadays, either in the medical field, either in the side sciences that we have as well, showing to us that how our thoughts impact our physical body, impact our lives. The back pains, the knee pains, right? This pain, that pain, the headaches that we have, all of these things also are generated by our thoughts. As he says, contemporary medical science is already aware of the fact that all mental tension greatly affects the physical body. When there is an inner conflict, watch this, and many of us are prone to have stomach aches sometimes, right? Dysfunction in the stomach. Sometimes we eat something and we want to eat, we're hungry, but after we eat, we're like, I shouldn't have eaten this, right? Or we eat something and we're going to have a discussion that we're not supposed to. Or we think about something that we're not supposed to. When there is an inner conflict, most of the time, the salivary glands cease their flow of secretion. The stomach becomes spasmodic and refuses to produce choleric acid. That then results in a digestive malfunction, manifesting as mucus colitis. This first stage often opens the door to serious organic disorders. The abnormal state of the gastrointestinal system, if recurrent, will damage the nutritional process that in turn affects the nervous system. Various symptoms then occur, starting from a slight irritation of the gastric membrane onto the extreme states of a complex condition of mental imbalance. Look at this. The physical body, we are projecting something into our physical body, and then the physical body is saying, Leo, no. And what happens? A loop. Because what I thought it was like, it was okay to think of this way, I was irritated. And then you feel your stomach telling you, don't do it anymore. And what we do, we take medicine. Right? Just take the medicine. You'll be fine tomorrow. But where's the root of the problem? What was that? Anger, right? It was within ourselves. It was within ourselves. There has to be a change. I don't like to be, with affirmation, sometimes we have to be careful. Sometimes we have to be inviting more than tell people what to do. But in a situation like this, and when we hear our friends telling us, Emmanuel, a good mentor, telling us this, then we have to tell one another, there has to be a change. Maybe we're thinking, it's too late now. No, it's not. Because guess what? You will lose this physical body, and you will get another one. And another one, and another. And you're going to go through this process until it changes. Do we want to change it sooner than later? Yes. We don't want to wait. That's why we're talking about illness and death. And that's why we talked about the before, and we're seeing our doing right now, our present situation now, and what can happen to us in the future. Look at this little guy. Depressed thoughts bring sickness to a healthy body and aggravate the condition of a sick body. There are two things here. We already know that this depressive thoughts bring sickness to a healthy body. If we're healthy and we think negative, we do things that is not appropriate for ourselves, we'll get sick. Simple as that. But why is Emmanuel saying that it will also aggravate the condition of a sick body. Why do you think so? Believe it or not, sometimes we ask to have and to come back onto a sick body. Oh, is it possible? It is possible. Is it another affirmation that we receive with Spiritism that sometimes if we're not careful with, we can kind of let our worries and our difficulties get in the way, not accepting, not acknowledging this as a way to purify ourselves, but it's true. It's true. So if we have a condition, a predisposition to some kind of illness, and we're not thinking positively, and we're taking that condition as a way to purify ourselves, acknowledging that we are not just the physical body as we saw, that we should learn from that difficulty, guess what? It's going to get worse. And perhaps with the mental reflexes that we're pushing towards that illness or that situation, it's only going to aggravate the physical body that we will receive in the future. There is a chapter, Kirsten will probably remember the chapter that we studied together, Sanctions and Assistance. What chapter is that, Kirsten? It's chapter 19. It's a beautiful chapter of this book, Action and Reaction. Again, a plug in here. Please take the book, read it. It's an amazing book. It's also, we also have a recording that Kirsten and I would put together, just highlights of the book if you want to go YouTube and Google it or pull it up. That also helps. But in this chapter, chapter 19, entitled Sanctions and Assistance, André Luiz is actually talking to Dr. Druzel, who is the Director Druzel, better way to say it, talking about this topic of sanctions and assistance. And what is sanctions when we think? And what is this assistance, right? That he says the following, that in order to recommence the physical struggle, and these are individuals reincarnating, Druzel is saying, we ask for a regimen of sanctions. Or if we do not have the right to ask for ourselves, someone else obtains it by interceding with the higher authorities on our behalf. What are these sanctions? And he explains that these sanctions is not that we are going to reincarnate with people that we're not doing so well. We didn't do so well in the last reincarnation. That can happen, but this is not the sanctions that he's talking about. He says the following. What we are referring to are the rectifying measures that we ask for after repeated failures in the same errors and desertions, such as the congenital deficiency with which we are reborn. Those who have wasted ample opportunity of work on earth by systematically ingesting corroding elements such as alcohol and other poisons of the organic forces, or who overindulging in gluttony almost always cross the waters of death as indirect suicides. And he goes on and on and on and on. All the current causes that we saw, that we abuse, and we try to blame somebody else. It's not my fault. It's the environment. It's the environment. I was pushed into that situation. And he goes on to say that they are assistants for these individuals who ask for these sanctions. They are being assisted because the higher minds, perhaps who are interceding, they know it's not easy. They know that the environment where we live is not easy. A lot of spirits, before they reincarnate, they have this anguish, this condition, as we also mentioned last week, before they reincarnate, because they know it's not easy. Especially when they're reincarnating, as we find in Missionaries of Light, with individuals that, in fact, we had difficulties in the past. Okay. This actually, part of the book explains also what is called the evolution pain, expiation pain, and assistance pain. But I'm not going to give you much on that. You have to go back to the book and read it. So the things that we that we sometimes question of being of an assistance, the illnesses that we have, it's there. So what are we doing with? Are we cultivating depressive thoughts? Or are we looking at it and say, I will get out of this? Jesus had already mentioned to us that those who weep, guess what? We will receive a better life. If it is not advisable to poison the body by the ingestion of dangerous substances, then one must also avoid turbulent states of the soul, disillusionment and sorrow, than to induce humiliating derangement, which result in constant inner turmoil. To cultivate pain, sorrow, irritation, and grief is to sow magnetic thorn bushes, fertilizing them in the emotional soil of our existence, thus poisoning the texture of our physical body, damaging our blood, nervous systems, organs, and the very centers of the body given to us by divine providence to use in the development of our faculties for eternal life. So again, folks, take it positively. It's a beautiful machine. It took a lot of planning. It takes a lot of effort. Think about it, to take care of your physical body. All the regulating system, everything that your body, your organs are doing right now, right? And we are just not utilizing properly. We forget our purpose, thinking that is sometimes just the physical body or the physical life, right? Or sometimes we also go into the other abysmal of life. Oh, I'm so spiritual, and we forget about the body. So we have to bring balance. And then we move on to death, that we already have talked about a little tiny bit. There's the idea of losing the body already, right? Or the idea that if we're here today and if we have conquered some kind of intelligence as we have, thank you, pat yourself on the shoulder, good job. It's because we have had previous life. If we were to think that God has a huge machine, right, and is creating minds or creating hearts, whichever way you want to put it, we would not be the first ones from the machine, coming out from the machine right now, right? We're not. And this is just a joke. It doesn't happen that way. But we're not those individuals because we have developed ourselves. We have a great system of communication, not a perfect one, but a great system of communication. We have a great way to conduct ourselves, to move around. We're not volitating yet, but one day we'll get there. But we're already flying. So there are many great things that we have accomplished. And there is one thing that I always admire in our society nowadays, is the ability that we have nowadays to see how deep we have got into our confusions of life. I was thinking about this the other day, and it's so true that through our complaints, sometimes it's already an indication that we want something better. Have you noticed this? That there are a lot of people still asleep, in the state of sleep, that they don't, it's okay, it's the environment. But there are people like, you know what, this is wrong. I'm wrong. I have done something wrong. I have to make it right. Right? When you see people helping others out of despair and out of they want to do it right, that is a great thing. That is an advancement in our society that sometimes we also take it for granted. But that is something that is hopefully preparing us to die well, to receive the next body in a much better way, without the illnesses that we just talked about right now. Look at this guy. This is a good representation that we want to bring this idea of death in both ways, in the positive way and the negative way. We think that death is that open door to that light. It can be, but most of the time, it's just a door that you crossed. And nothing changes. Well, Leo, what are you trying to say? We stay here? No. But our mental conditions, the way we're vibrating, it will continue. one of the ways, the escapes or the ideas that a suicide have is that by killing himself or herself, that things will change. The suffering, it will be potentiated. It will be 10 times, a million times worse. It's just a door, losing the physical body. Now, what we're doing right now is going to change how we perceive and now what we receive on the other side. Emmanuel says the following: seeing that our mind is the mirror of life, we should have no difficulty in understanding that immediately after death, the images that will prevail are those more deeply etched, on its surface. They were engraved there by our will, thought, persistence, and intensive mental reaction. So what are you thinking right now? Or what have you been thinking for this past week? For this year? It's October now, 2018. The past 3 years, the past decade. Think about it. Do an analysis, and you will see that sometimes we will find within ourselves the repetitive things. That sometimes when you go through the moments of life, that, oh man, I wish I could get rid of this. Why not? What are you waiting for? What is stopping you from making that change? Because once you cross the door, guess what? It's going to be there if you don't take care of it right now. If you don't take care of it right now. Thought that is a fluidic plasma has the ability to materialize its own creations and give them temporary vitality, and movement. Therefore, after our transition to the grave, we naturally become obsessed by the pictures that our imagination creates and are kept in a state of hallucinations. Most incarnate spirits experience this process during common sleep. Instead of retreating from the body during the hours of rest, they remain by it receiving primitive thought reflexes and sensations that are in need of adjustment. Remember, through our sleep, we're temporarily disconnected from the physical body, not totally. And we're connecting with who? We're connecting with one another here, but we're also connected with the discarnated ones that we presented at the beginning. That's why we brought that representation again of the spirit with the perispirit connecting with us. And through that moment, we're exchanging information. So whatever I thought, whatever I felt throughout the day or throughout the week, at the end of the day, when I go to sleep, we're going to connect. The exchanges will happen. And will be potentiated based on the validity that we gave it to. Is it simple to think this way? It is. Is it simple to correct? No. Because we have done it over and over and over and over again. But the question stands, what are we doing to change, right? All circles of life need the acquisition of good habits to comply with the education process. All accomplishments of the spirit are made possible through repetitious lessons. These classes are vast sectors of specific work where, through constant effort and long duration, objectives are reached to suit each particular field of knowledge. Emmanuel then, which we didn't bring here, he brings examples of any classes that we're taking to attain a degree, right? Or to obtain a degree, right? For example, if I want to be a mathematician, I will have to take a lot of math. Several courses that the universities put together, right? That the scholars, they see fit for that degree in order for us to get that degree. Anybody who is going to the military, as he mentioned, anybody who is going to law school or perhaps medical school, what do they have to do? Repeat several and several times the same process, the same teachings, so that they grasp it and they know what it is, so they can then serve society, right? And they receive what? They receive what? The diploma, right? It's the same thing with death. It's the same thing with death. It's our diploma, but now, here's the thing. You can receive a diploma of, okay, here's your diploma to go back, or here's your diploma to say you did well. And you're going to go back now to put even more into practice, or even learn even more, right? Look what Emmanuel says. Following the same principle, death gives us a certificate at the completion of each repeated experience to which we have adjusted ourselves, as every spirit more or less transforms himself into what he keeps in his mind. This is how death distills our total mental content and compels us to live temporarily within these thought patterns. If the content is good, we have our portion of heaven that corresponds to the nest we have built within ourselves. On the other hand, if it is bad, we must, out of necessity, be detained in our portion of hell that corresponds to the evil we created until right purification is completed. A hell that was of our own making, created in the intimacy of our conscience. Please forgive me for having to read because it's intense. Forgive me for having to read because this is a whole lot. When we think that the idea of a dark place that we go, destined to stay there forever, is something that someone else created, that the church created, we have to think again. And it's, again, a lot of explanation about this. The pictures that we create is also in this book, Action and Reaction, towards the beginning of it. And we have to rescue this idea of what are we creating in our lives right now? The goodness or the hell? The heaven or hell? Also, another plug. This is what this amazing book does to us. Read this, Heaven and Hell. I even thought to bring some of the cases here, but it would make it a little bit longer. Perhaps in a future study, we can do that. But I brought one passage of this beautiful book. Very simple. We always mention to our friends, please read it, please read it, please read it. It's André Luiz in the lower zones. At least receiving, not in the lower zone, receive the explanation of what the lower zones, what we call in Portuguese, and it was brought to the English language, the umbral, right? The hells that we perhaps perceive. If you have seen the movie, you will see it starts in that passage, in that moment where he finds himself in the umbral. And then he kind of recollects as well throughout the movie that he was in that region. But the mentor was explaining to him what this umbral is. On chapter 12, entitled Umbral or Lower Zones, explaining to him what this was. Because again, we think that it's something that someone else created. And I was pushed from an abysm and I fell there. And there we were, right? And he says the following. This is the mentor saying, the umbral begins within the earth's crust. He obligingly continued. It is a zone of darkness for those who, while on earth, were not resolved in following the path of their sacred duties in order to fulfill them. Instead, they lingered in the valley of indecision or in the swamp of numerous wrongdoings. When spirits reincarnate, they promise to fulfill a program of service assigned to them by the Father. However, when they recommence their experience on the planet, they find it very difficult to keep their word and only seek what will satisfy their own selfish ends. Thus, they hold on to the same hatred to their enemies and the same passions for their friends. But hatred is not justice, nor passion love. We'll stop right here. Say it again, because this is beautiful. But hatred is not justice, nor is passion love. What we think that is justice, especially when we're taking justice with our own hands, it's not justice, it's hatred. It's the wrong way to do so. And the love that we feel for certain things or for certain people, it's just a passion that will change over time. Especially when there are certain things that we find beautiful is not there anymore. Right? And as we see a lot of people splitting because the enchantment of the past is not there anymore, right? Or situations. So this is the lower zone. This is the umbral, right? Or the hell starting right here with us. It's not someplace else. And as we multiply with our mental reflexes, it's only going to gain more on us or get bigger on us. And the same amount of energy that we put into these thoughts as we create it, sometimes unconsciously or consciously, we'll probably have to spend 2 or 3 times as much or even more to get out of it, right? To finalize, everyone, everything that deviates from the law of love and progress, that does not follow the principles of renewal and sublimation, causes blockages in the mind. This is nothing more than accumulating personal reflexes. Without any value for the common good, this only consolidates the fixed ideas we have in ourselves, very distant from our fundamental reality. What is our purpose? Now that we know that, number one, our reality is not this. Now that we know how detrimental this can be, these exchange of thought reflexes that is not appropriate for our regeneration and for our evolution as well. We talk about wanting to have a better world, a better society, but what are we doing? It's not easy, I know. When you turn on the TV and you only see craziness. It's not easy when you get up in the morning and you have a million things in your mind and then something happens that you're like, and then we're talking about, with the family members, right? With the friends sometimes, that we're like, okay, I wasn't expecting this. It's like, I always like to joke. I was jogging, on my slow 5 miles an hour, right? And somebody just pushed me on the side of the road. I wasn't expecting this, right? But it's life. It's life. We have to get up and say, this is not going to stop me. We have to continue. We have to continue. As I have done in the past, I believe last 2 meetings, I put the last 2 sentences or 2 paragraphs that Emmanuel brings to us. The first one that I will read is for the illness chapter, and this one here for this chapter about death. Going back to illness, let us then cultivate understanding and patience, kindness and constructive tolerance wherever we go, only by paying the price of unceasing mental renewal for good, by noble studies and constant service to mankind. Will be able to escape illnesses, thus, I now have to go back, sorry. Thus making good use of the gifts of the Lord and avoiding the destructive mental reflexes that cause indirect suicide. The same indirect suicide that we just mentioned about André Luiz. Because he got to the other side of life thinking that, well, what have I done to be in this dark place? What have I done to construct this or to be part of this environment, right? The same way we also question, why am I in 2018 in the United States of America in Maryland or whatever state, whatever country, whatever part of the world? Why can't I be in Jupiter or this other planet? We have to think. André Luiz himself, he then noticed that the style of life that he had, and with the information that he had received in life, caused him to be in the position that he was after he discarnated. Hard to believe. It's on the books. Now it's a movie as well. We can study together. We can talk more about it. But it's up to us to make our heaven, to create our good environment, and put aside all the craziness that we have created in the past. This is why to die means to enter even deeper into the world within ourselves, after taking a long time to be able to discard our less fortunate reflexes that have been transformed into a hallucinatory state, created by our ideas fixed in darkness, or when we improve our reflexes by adjusting them towards goodness. We can simply move on from one sphere to another, gradually advancing to new horizons of ascension and light. Want to be in Jupiter? Change. You want to be happy? We need to change. We want to be happy. We want to, we have to, excuse me, we have to wish to be happy. We have to have the desire to be happy. It's not only to say it, but to truly fight it, to truly agree with that idea. That when something negative comes to us, we don't accept. That when something negative that has been bothering us, as we try to do the analysis every now and then, for the past 3 years, for the past 10 years, for the whole life, and we say, enough is enough, I don't want this anymore. And truly, just as we take a bad piece of paper and we discard it, we do the same thing. Now, obviously, there's work to be done, right? We have to insert in our lives good ideals. We have to insert in our lives people who will also help us, readings that will also help us. Turn off things that perhaps will only make that worse, right? Eating, drinking things that will make our lives also, or that situation worse. Because we have seen that depending on what we eat, depending on what we drink, think, feel, it's going to aggravate what we're going through right now. Please do not take this as, oh my gosh, I went to the center and we talk about illness. I went to the center and we talk about death. But it's just a helpful tip that we have in our lives to live better. Whether we are months old, whether we are 10, right, Angelina? 10, right? Okay. Just making sure that she's paying attention. Whether we are 40, whether we're 70, whether we are whatever. This is the moment. This is the moment for us to act. This is the moment for us to stop, reflect, and say, we don't want to go through this again. Let's make a pact over here, right? If we can do this, right? In the next lifetime, we will come together in a meeting that we're not going to talk about these problems anymore. We will get together and we'll be projecting ourselves onto something way better than this, right? I know it's going to take time, but hang in there. Just hang in there and believe, because the message from our master, guess what? Is of optimism, is of saying, weep now. And this weep is not just sit in the corner and not doing anything and cry, but fight. Be positive, right? Want the best for your life, and then the best will come. So I'll open up for questions before we move on to the end of our meeting tonight. And I know our friend here had risen his hand in the middle of it. He was holding, so.
You know, I know you talked about a lot of things that can and bother us spiritually. Like if you drink, that's considered indirect suicide. And people that take opioids, they pass away. That's indirect suicide. What about somebody who goes to work and he has a job, he likes his job, but then the employer wants more done, and the job gets stressful. And I've seen this where I've worked for 41 years. I've seen people under stress that had cardiac arrest and died. Would somebody dying from stress trying to provide for a family, would that be indirect suicide?
Great question. And I would like to acknowledge again what we have just mentioned earlier, that we're now in this awakening state, right? Because in the past, living a miserable life at work was something okay. You had no choice, right? To go to work and not be happy about work. It's just life. I have to provide for my family. No, it's okay for you to go back and say, this is not right. We have laws now that prevent crazy things to happen, right? So going back to the question, is indirect suicide? Think about it. We have a choice to make a change in our lives. We know that is detrimental to ourselves, to stay in a place that is toxic, that I can not deal with that situation, but I stay there for sometimes convenience, sometimes for the lack of being courageous enough to say enough is enough and looking for something else. Sometimes that pay of that job is, they pay me so well for that stress that if I leave and I go to a different job, I will have to decrease or bring down the way I live. Foolish, right? In our lives. Indirect suicide. Because we have a choice. We also have to acknowledge that there are certain situations, and we see this in certain cases, excuse me, again, on the book Action and Reaction, that some individuals, they go through, they ask for that condition, tough places to work, tough conditions to live with other individuals, to rescue things or to do it correctly at this time, but under the pain. But there are special cases. And for us to judge that this case is this and this case is that is not the right thing to do. What we can do here is to do an analysis. If we are going through such a thing, right? Or if we see a friend or a loved one that we see that the place of work is being detrimental to him or her and detrimental to others, because a lot of people, when they have, and they work they work in an environment like that, what happens most of the cases, they bring that home. Perhaps what they cannot say to the crazy boss, they will say to the wife, they will say to the son, they will say to the husband, right? At home. It's like you take your work, all that craziness, and you don't have a way to liberate yourself. But you liberate yourself at home with others that has nothing to do with that. So now it becomes toxic to those individuals that has nothing to do with that situation. Sometimes they do, because collectively also we have our issues. But because we have a choice nowadays, because we are living in an environment that is much better than the past, then it makes us reflect that it could be direct suicide, indirect suicide. It could be that the person really should have done something better for their lives. So you have to look at a more ample, bring the whole context and what's happening in order for us to make an affirmation, but then again, not to judge, but to simply try to help. But thanks for the question. Thank you. Because we think sometimes that the craziness of life is what, as you mentioned, is drinking something, right? Is eating something, or no, is how we're living as well.
Thank you, Leo. Again, great talk. I actually have several comments, 3 comments, one of which I think Paula may or may not touch on, but I kind of learned from her, and I think Emmanuel I'll talk about that first, and I'll let her talk more about it later. Is when Emmanuel is alluding to this. I don't know how new the idea of gut health is. It's probably not new. For most people, it's new, but it's been researched for a while, that how important it is to have good gut health and how that can affect your brain. And so we see from Emmanuel how important that is, rather I should say, how important it is for us to resolve our inner conflicts, which then can lead to ultimately our body screaming at us saying, hey, you need to get it together. Which ultimately led me to some other thoughts about one thing, for instance, especially regarding illness, which seems so taboo in and out of the Spiritist arena for various reasons, whether it's mental health, physical health, or somewhere a mix of everything. But that once the damage is done and we are sick, often we need to go on medication or go into therapy, or do an intense spiritual makeover to reset and address the underlying issues. And something that also came to mind, that all of that is what the new term for that is self-care, self-love, which we don't do enough of. And that is just basically acknowledging that we matter and that I'm worthy of further analysis and care. And we usually, I was reading some work by Dr. Brené Brown, and usually we live in such a bad culture, and I don't mean like the Brazilian or the American culture, but I mean like the culture of society that where I should work myself to death, and don't worry about myself, worry about others, worry about everybody else but myself, and just keep pushing to at one point you hit a brick wall, and life tells you, care about yourself, love yourself, you matter. And I think Emmanuel, in his own way, is alluding to that. And Joanna DeAndres does a lot of that also in the work in her books. And so we need to change that culture. And I love the work by Dr. Brené Brown, because culture affects our concepts and our ideas of what's normal. Like, oh, it's totally okay. This person's running themselves ragged, but it's okay. I'm working really, really hard. And I think forget his name, the gentleman, I'm sorry. Martin? Marty. Yeah, and we see this culture of like work yourself to death, this culture of like sometimes in a work setting where it's like the pressure, and we live in a work culture sometimes where you're praised for working yourself to death, for working the late night hours, for forgetting about your family and putting your blood, sweat, and tears into your work, and then hitting age 50 and you're going for coronary bypass, and you have to have surgeries and all these things and you wake up and go, wow, I gave to this company, but where has my life gone? So anyway, I just wanted to say that I think it's so important for us to do self-care, to not get to that point where illness is knocking on our door. But if it does, that's okay. I just wanted to stand on my soapbox. That's all. Paula.
Thank you. Just go ahead.
I guess I get to talk. My reaction, it was excellent for us to think further on, this is a tremendous rationale for a daily forgiveness practice. We talk about before we go to sleep at night to take inventory of the day. Mm-hmm. It is not easy to do that inventory without judgment. To keep practicing that we are noting the events, the omissions or something, and
right.
Then forgive the other and forgive yourself and just take a note to change.
Thank
you. That I think is it's a tough practice, but eventually you see the payoff, because this description of what happens right after death parallels what the Buddhists call the bardo state. And you are your hallucinations.
Right.
And where do you get your reality check from?
Within.
We need to trust a spiritual system or a person. Somebody has to help us make sure we're not lost. And then the last one, to go to what Kirsten originally, and I too get excited about, is what we call the gut and psychology syndrome. And there's a book I use when I work with young children. And there was a lot of research going on, more so in Europe and other countries, that if you can correct the microbiome of a child before the age of 3, you can really improve certain behavioral characteristics, including the autism spectrum.
Thank you. There are a couple of things that I want to go back and touch on, because we're almost running out of time as well. Is that there's a passage in the book, Missionaries of Light. Please forgive me, I don't have the actual chapter to tell you. You can always go back and look for it. But there is a study of Andrea Louise with the mentor, and I can't remember who was actually accompanying Andrea Louise, that they were analyzing the group of people who were in the mediumistic meeting. In one, Missionaries of Light, yes. I know. I just don't remember the chapter. And one of the aspects that they were analyzing is actually the gut process. Thank you, Kirsten. Kirsten has this thing for remembering the chapter. It's okay. If it's not on chapter 4, it's okay as well. Let's read the book. We'll find out. And Leo, read the book again. Maybe you'll remember next time. So they are analyzing the way or let's say the lack of the digestive system was not working well of that individual because of the thoughts, because of what they have been eating, and all of those things that are happening, and how that influenced as well the whole meeting. Think about this. Somebody's stomach is not helping the meeting. And sometimes we go to places and we're like, why I don't feel well? Why it feels kind of funny here? The whole environment is actually needs to take into consideration. So that's number one. The number two is chapter number 9. It always amazes me to read chapter number 9 of this book. It's entitled Nutrition. Nutrition in the Spirit Realm in Nossolar. How the governor of the spiritual colony had to decrease the amount of goods that they were eating, or the way they were eating as well, in order for them to live a better life. The heavy content of food, of material that they were actually eating. They had to change. And there were a lot of pushbacks from the individuals. Look, spirits, they didn't have the physical body, right? There are a lot of pushbacks saying we need this, especially those who dealt with a lot of numbers and all these things are saying, no, we need this heavy food. We get hungry. And we do, right? Sometimes when we think a whole lot, when we study a whole lot, we get hungry. But what are we eating? How are we changing ourselves that our physiology is helping our physical body? It comes with the mind. And the last thing that I would like to say about this is, as we were preparing for this talk, and this is the last comment that we'll make so we can close, is, she has a question. She has a question. Can we go on, Daniel? Because they want to ask questions. But, okay. In any case, as we're preparing for this, I was listening to Divaldo again on this idea of illness, of getting better. And he reminded us on the talk that I was listening of an issue that he had years ago. Talking about years and years ago, that he started feeling reproducing into his physical body an angina, right? That's how you say in English. And one of the angels comes to him and say, ask yourself, go to the mirror, ask yourself, where is this coming from? Where is the root cause of this, right? And he did that for a couple of times. And at first he said it was kind of awkward for me to go to the mirror and ask myself what's going on, or, and he started doing this process, and he noticed that it was something from the past, that he was carrying within himself, and that he was actually now being reproduced into his physical body, to the point that it was actually not allowing him to speak well. And if we can say that that's what the Father Franco does, besides obviously being a medium, is think about it. It was not only impacting him, but it's also impacting all those individuals who count on the Father Franco and many others to speak, to bring an enlightenment into their lives. And it made me think about my situation. And I'll say something personally here, that I think we're in a good group, even though we're putting this on the web as well. Last year I had one of those beautiful back crises, if some of you remember, right? And I remember, and I mentioned this to some of you already, that the morning that I woke up and I was feeling, my back, being tall, you get, after so many years, you start feeling it. It's normal, right? It's a normal wear and tear that we feel. And I was upset with certain things in life and certain things at work, at, personal life and all those things, that I told myself, I remember, and I will say it to you here, so please don't repeat it. I wish I could stay in bed the whole day. I got up, even though my wish was to stay in bed the whole day. I had to get up. I had to do the things that I had to do, go to work, whatever. And from that day on, my back started progressing. The pain started progressing to the point that I could barely walk. Guess what? I was in bed for 3 weeks. Yes. I was in bed for 3 weeks. And some of you remember, I was walking like a Nate. I was walking like a Nate. And as I was studying this, it brought more emphasis to what I have tried to develop in myself. That when these thoughts come, because guess what? Some days, you want to stay in bed, you want to sleep, I get up immediately and I do something different, right? And I choose to, forgive myself. And I choose to forgive the problems that I'm facing or the people that I'm facing, because what comes towards me, it was something that was generated by this or that individual. I didn't do it. If I'm connected with right now, yes, I have a level of responsibility towards, but it's not my fault. And we have to do something. And how many times we tell ourselves the same thing? And I'm open up with you guys because I don't want to go through this because it hurts. Sometimes it's not the back. Sometimes it could be the knee. Sometimes it could be this. Sometimes it could be the intestines, right? Sometimes we could be the liver. Sometimes it could be the mind in itself, the headaches of life that we have. It's for us to really open up our eyes and to change. So we'll go to Yasko real quick and then Alba. Okay?
Thank you for allowing us to make comments. It's because Emmanuel is so rich and the chapters are so rich. I feel that this concept that he explained about death, about how ourselves are the creators of our own heaven or hell, that's powerful. That is giving us back the power of decipher ourselves, right? So in this frame, I was thinking also how important it is the meditation, because I was thinking how I'm going to retrain my mind or my thoughts, because I've been having experiences for so many centuries of negativity that I need to start doing some sort of mental exercise. So I thought, okay, meditation is one of the tools. That's my first comment. My second comment is about the spirits that are in the lower zone or the umbral. They themselves, they put themselves in that situation. And sometimes we as spirits, we pray for everybody, and we pray for incarnates and discarnates as well. And I was thinking, oh, I need to change my prayer about the discarnates in the lower zone, like, oh, please, for them to be in a better position is, or I don't know, to go further or higher, or
Right.
it is like, no. Oh, please give them the wisdom, the
strength.
light, the clarity, I don't know. But I feel like also when we pray for others, we need to change our prayers and what are our desires for them. That's my comment.
Thank you. It is true, because as we learn with Spiritism, especially when we learn about the mediumistic exchanges that we have, one of the works of the Spiritist Center is to have a mediumistic meeting where we help the individuals who come seek help at the Spiritist Center, right, to liberate themselves from whatever that may be. And if there is a spiritual component where they're being influenced by another spirit or a group of spirits, we're not only ask for the help for the incarnated one, but those spirits as well, right? So it should be a help on both sides. And we have seen this in these sessions here too, that we should pray for those who are coming against us or not allowing us to fulfill ourselves, or those who are in the lower zone. So it is true. It is a great reminder that we need to change our perspective towards the suffering ones. It is one.
Yeah, it was about disease, illnesses. In 58, when this book was published, I think no one could understand well all this involvement or impact of our behavior, our thoughts on our life. But today, we cannot say the same, because there's so much literature and the medical approach has changed so much, including all this soft program that we are in the hardwired body. So in 50s, we thought infection was all because we were in an infected place with viruses, bacteria, etc. Today, we know that that's not the only component.
Right.
It all depends on our immunological state. Those that are healthy or have a healthy immunological system, they can fight the infection much better. That's why some people get sick, some other people don't. In case of stress, how we deal with stress, like Marty said, he went through this job in a nice way. He conquered, he went through without having a heart attack. The other ones had a heart attack. What was the difference? One had more resilience than the other. It could deal better. It was better wired to face the problems. And today we know that not only the brain has this we call plasticity, it can be molded according to the impulse and the stimuli, But all our cells, trillions of cells, are changed by our way to live because of the epigenetics. We're not a determined hardwired genetics, a result of a hardwired genetics or hard construct of genetics. We have what we call epigenetics, which includes lifestyle, nutrition, how we behave, that will change even the predisposition of our genetics. So we don't need to stay sick. We may become sick, but we can get out of the sickness. Even the terminal cancer patients can reverse their condition if they decide to change. Not all, of course, because they have all the plan to come with that certain illness, but in many cases we can reverse because our machinery is not any longer this hard construct machine. We can change.
We can change. We can certainly change. Thank you. It is so true. And the book was published in 1958. And this is something that also crossed my mind as I was reading this chapter, Yasko, because Emmanuel says again, one cannot say with finality that all physical diseases are a result of mind. The understanding that Emmanuel has towards this idea of mental reflexes, he's taken a step back, and I think, this is Leo saying now, that he's allowing science to do its job, not putting anything out there to say, you will see that our thoughts, our feelings will do the job or will break the job, right? He was just waiting. We have to, and you see the respect that that these higher minds have for our evolutionary path, right? Of what we go and fight to discover, right? Now we have, several years later, a much better understanding, and this is like, okay, we have it. Now, with the information that we have from Emmanuel and Joanna de Angelis, many others, right? And around the world, as you mentioned, Paula, of the Buddha, the other teachings that we have around the world, and science to scientifically prove that, in fact, it can really ruin our lives. And as Yasu just mentioned, that we can change as well. And what are we doing? And what are we doing? So we have to be really on guard. We also have to take in consideration what Jesus mentioned to us. Watch and pray. Be watchful. And it is in this process that we will rehabilitate ourselves. Because just by thinking that I don't want this anymore for myself, I want to live a better life, I want to construct a better future for myself and those around me, guess what? It's a beautiful beginning. What's going to come next, we can only see it. That will be for our next meetings in the beyond, okay? So for us to finalize this beautiful book, this amazing encounter that we had for, it will be 11 sessions, we will talk about love. I want you guys to think about one thing. We're not going to meet in November. We're going to meet back in December. Ask yourself, don't have to do it, but ask yourself, something that you're being asked to love, but it's hard. In other words, try to look for something that doesn't agree much with you, but you're being called to love. And then you may ask, what is love? What is to be agreeable? It's up to you. It's up to you. But ask again, something or a situation in your life that is perhaps not as agreeable as you want to be, but you're being called to love. And we'll talk again, and we'll meet again in December. Thank you so much, and let's continue with our evening tonight. Thank you.